I'm Sean Derns, Camera Senior Research Analyst. First of all, I want to thank you for logging on. About 500 people have registered for today's webinar, and I think that's a testament to the concern of all of you during this difficult time. We truly hope that none of you have friends or family who have been wounded in the war crimes of October 7th or since, although it seems like all of us know someone who was there. In the wake of the horrific massacre, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has officially declared a state of war and has mobilized hundreds of thousands of army reserves. And all eyes are now on Gaza as Israel prepares for a ground invasion. However, Israel's foes aren't just in the south. Others are smelling blood in the north, waiting to see if or when they can strike at the Jewish state. It is this other threat in the north that we're looking at today in this webinar. To help us understand what Israel is doing about this threat and what we can expect to see out of Israel and in international politics over the next days and weeks, we're fortunate to have with us today Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi, formerly of the IDF. She is a founder and president of Alma, a nonprofit research and education center specializing in Israel's security challenges on its northern border. She served for 15 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, concentrating in military intelligence. Her insightful analysis has led her to be selected by the Jerusalem Post as one of the top 50 most influential global Jewish personalities. She'll speak now for about 25 to 30 minutes. Then we'll go to Q&A. If you run your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A icon, and just click there and type your questions while she speaks. We probably won't be able to get most of your questions and comments, but please know that we will read and consider everything that you write in. We want to hear your thoughts, so please don't be shy. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Sarit Zahavi. Thank you for joining camera today.
Thank you for having me. And I want to start on a personal note to say that to get prepared to this webinar was a challenge because my family is spread all over, and I am busy not only with the spreading the word, I'll put it this way, about what is happening up north and the analysis of what is happening now in Israel, but also I'm busy of, very much busy of the thoughts of how do I protect my family? Can I protect my family? My husband was drafted last week. He's up north, and my two boys, which are 17 and 18, were not drafted yet. My boys waiting to be drafted. Don't want to leave the north, even though I beg them. I am now speaking to you after I left for a few days to my parents in the center of Israel, and with my little girl. So we are here, and we come and go from the north because you know you can never know when everything will get out of control on the northern border. And when we are at home, when I am at home with her, I can hardly sleep because I'm busy asking myself, how will I protect her if something will happen, if there will be an infiltration? I know that the situation, and it brings me now to describe the situation itself. I know that the situation in the north is very different from October 7th in the south, because the army is deployed. We see soldiers everywhere. It is fully deployed to protect the civilians that are living up north, the communities. Many of the communities were evacuated from 0 to 5 kilometers, which is around 60,000 people. Were evacuated, and we don't understand how they are going to go back to their homes, in which scenario, because since the war started, actually except for today, there were every day a few attacks of mainly anti-tanks, but not only, that came from Lebanon to Israel. And it's not safe to be in these communities because with anti-tanks, giving an alert is much more challenging. Intercepting it's much more challenging, and if IDF doesn't trace the squad that is about to attack on time, the missile will be launched, and these are very accurate missiles that Hezbollah has. So the feeling is not, I cannot say we feel secure, even though the army is fully deployed as much as possible, stretching for between two fronts. Our head chief of staff said in the first few days that the contract between the civilians and the army, the army must protect the civilians, that this contract was broken on October 7th, on Saturday. And I think that it is very true to describe how we feel up north, because now we feel that the IDF needs to prove that he can protect us again. It comes to, conversations that a mother should not have with her kids. If we spend the night, all of us at home, and I'm afraid that there will be a ground invasion to Gaza. And day to day, the Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister promised that if there will be ground invasion to Gaza, there will be another front from the north. So we take the family and we have a conversation of scenarios. If there will be an infiltration, we should escape from this window. If there will be an infiltration and we have more time, we will do this and that. If we have rockets, we'll do this and that. This is the shelter that we should get into. The shelter is not big enough. How many people can be in the shelter? For how long? This is questions that shouldn't be discussed with a 10-year-old girl. And every day I have this dilemma of how much to expose my little girl to all these questions. And how do I, as a mother, protect her? So, it's being the expert and trying to brief reporters every day and spread the word about what is truly happening, which in a minute I will share with you my point of view around that. But first and foremost it's existential fear to your own family and daily questions of how do we protect our families. I don't have a gun. My husband doesn't have a gun. And I don't want to expose in this form all the details that are frightening me, but you understand, I live 9 kilometers from the border. And even though the army is there, we don't feel completely safe. Living in northern Israel, in my small town, by the way, very few alerts. We had less alerts than in the center. I came here and I had alerts. I came to the center of Israel to my parents. I had alerts. In Farvadim, where I live, we didn't have alerts. But the feeling is the feeling of a war zone, in a sense that there are soldiers everywhere, in a sense that there is always something happening in the sky. There's always noise. You don't get silent. During the day, during the night, you don't get silent. We wake up from that. It's an atmosphere that it's difficult to explain. You try to have normal life. You try not to bring this fear to your kids as much as possible, but and many Israelis maybe don't feel like me, because I'm more exposed to the information and to the scenarios and to the capabilities. Maybe I'm even more exposed to the capabilities of the other side and the capabilities of my army. But it is definitely, personally, I must say, it is definitely a very difficult experience. And mainly with regard to the questions that are coming all the time of what exactly happened on Saturday morning on October 7th. How did it happen? I have some answers, but not enough answers. I can relate to that, if you will, during the Q&A to give a little bit of insight of how this happened. So I don't have all the answers, but I can understand some of what happened and how quickly it happened. Let's talk about how I analyze the situation, and first, what's the situation as we speak on the Israeli border? As I said, we had every day few attacks by Hezbollah, mostly by Hezbollah, even though to some of the attacks Hamas claim responsibility, and to some of the attacks Islamic Jihad claim responsibility. But to most of the attack, Hezbollah claim responsibility, and these attacks looked like attacks that are actually meant to prepare for a ground invasion of Hezbollah into Israel according to its offensive plan, as was published a decade ago. Meaning that in these attacks, Hezbollah attacked IDF positions, IDF vehicles on the borderline with anti-tank missiles. Hezbollah attacked with anti-tank missiles and other kind of tough stuff of technologies, different kinds of weapons that can be accurate to short ranges, attacked our cameras on the border, attacked our antennas on the border, meaning trying to blind us and create the same blindness that we had on October 7th when the attack started in Gaza. And trying to damage our preparedness on the borderline, understanding that there is preparedness. The reason that the IDF evacuated the communities from next to the border, as I've said, 200,000 people were evacuated, is to enable, if there will be an invasion, to enable the IDF fight inside these communities, inside these, I would say, empty communities, and that way not endanger the civilians as much as possible. In these communities, only were left the farmers and the quick reaction forces, which are actually civilians, residents of these communities that have guns and are trained by the IDF. Many of them trained before the war. Of course, there was preparations and more training after the war started. So in this respect, I understand that there is a plan of how to defend us, an operational plan of how exactly to defend us, what exactly to do. But when I'm looking at the plan of the other side, I understand that this plan is not going to be, if it will be executed, if Hezbollah will decide to eventually go to this massive ground invasion, this plan, somebody will cross, maybe 10% out of the 3,000 to 5,000, maybe more, maybe less. We don't know the exact numbers. Some of them will cross, and some of them will infiltrate. The terrain in the north is different than the terrain in the south, because in the south it is flat. You can see with the binocular, you can see to large distances. In the north, the terrain is different. It's hills and valleys. In this respect, it's more difficult to go, tens of kilometers into Israel. But on the other hand, it is easy to hide. In the hills, in the valleys, in the forest, there are more trees. If you take a binocular, you wouldn't see somebody who is hiding between these trees. So there are a lot of differences between the two fronts in this respect. What's the plan of Hezbollah? I don't know what the plan, I must say here, I don't know what the plan of the Israeli army is. I truly don't know, and I can't even say that I don't understand. When we speak about the ground invasion to Gaza, we've been waiting for 3 weeks for the ground invasion to Gaza. And maybe it's because of the hostages, and maybe it's because of American air defense systems that we are waiting for them to be deployed in the Middle East. And maybe it's because of the preparations of the IDF, and maybe it's because Netanyahu is hesitating. I don't know. We heard all these explanations in the past few days. So I don't know why the ground invasion didn't start. Maybe it's because there is no ground invasion, just small incursions like we've seen this morning. I truly don't know what's the plan. All I can say is that the army is stretched on both fronts, and the soldiers are prepared and they are ready to get in. We see high morale among the soldiers, even though you see me and I'm talking about myself, but along the young soldiers, you do see high morale and a lot of understanding that they are actually protecting our homes and our lives and our very existence here in the state of Israel. This I can say, soldiers were at the time meet here, and soldiers that are my neighbors and serving in Gaza, or my family. There is an understanding that we can no longer live with these monsters, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah. When I'm saying that, I'm not talking about the government, I'm talking about the people here. The people here understand that if all of this will just end with a ceasefire. I'm not talking about peace. There is a difference between peace and ceasefire, difference between normalization and ceasefire. There is no peace or normalization with Hamas or Hezbollah. These are just ceasefires. And if it will end with a ceasefire, it would mean two things. First, that with Hamas, it will be capable of building its brutal capabilities again. And with Hezbollah, it would mean that the moment that the soldiers will not be deployed up north anymore, meaning that the reservists will be released, they're not protected anymore. And the same scenario can repeat itself. So if I'm getting to operational issues, what I can say is that there is no physical barrier that can protect us from an invasion. The only thing that can protect us from an invasion is the soldiers, is the fact that the army is prepared with intelligence and operational preparations to this kind of invasion. We cannot keep this preparedness forever because we are based on reservists, and the fact that more than 300,000 reservists were recruited means that the whole economy is paralyzed. Many businesses are closed. People cannot go to work, and as I've said, 200,000 people are evacuated from their homes, not knowing if they will be able to come back. In the south, there is no home to go back to. If we're speaking about normal lives ended here in October 7th. There is no normal life in Israel anymore. And now, how do we go back? What's the mechanism? These are questions that are being asked here all the time, and we don't have all the answers. Sorry that I have a lot of questions and not all the answers here. What's the plan of Hezbollah? I am among those who think that this is not a war between Israel and Hamas. I think it is wrong to frame it like that. I think that it is wrong to talk about Hamas as ISIS, not because there are no similarities to ISIS, but because there are much more similarities to the Nazis. I think that if people will understand that Hamas is ISIS in America, ISIS is outside of America, is in the Middle East. But Hamas is inside Israel. Hamas is on our borders. Hezbollah is on our borders. The reason there are no elections in Palestinian Authority is because we all understand that Hamas will win these elections in West Bank as well. If we will not eliminate the monster, we continue to live with that. And I think that once you understand it's the Nazis, you understand that in Europe of World War II, it was not an option to have the Nazis continue to control Germany or Hitler continue to live after all the atrocities that were executed against the world and against the Jews in particular. And it's the same here. I will not be safe until the threat, I will not feel safe until the threat will be eliminated, because I live next to a monster that has the capability and the desire to eliminate me. As simple as that. Now, I've been saying that throughout my professional life. And, you know, we always have kind of mechanism of denial, but now even that is lost. What we saw on Saturday, October 7th, was not a protest of Palestinians to release from occupation. It was part of a master plan that Iran made to attack the state of Israel from multiple fronts and create a campaign, what they call unification of fronts, from Gaza, from West Bank, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Yemen. They built their power to do so in the past decade with various militias in all these places. They exposed their plans, they didn't hide it. They exposed their capabilities, they didn't hide it. And I had in my computer the offensive plan of Hezbollah that was published a decade ago. An offensive plan that looks exactly the same like what Hamas had done in October 7th, including the idea of slaughtering Israelis in their communities while they are asleep, including the idea of starting from firepower of barrages of mortars to the communities next to the border, and then ground invasion and invasion from the sea, like what was done, and then taking hostages to become human shield. It is all in the video. It's not my interpretation. It's describing the video to you. You can find it on our Twitter account. When I looked at this video now, after 10 years that it was in my computer and I didn't open it, I just immediately sent it to translation in English. So everybody, the world should know that we are not facing something just from the south. The plan is the same, it exists. And the only dilemma now, if there is a dilemma, is when to execute it. So, you know, we always say, how come they didn't attack us from both fronts at the same time? It's a big question. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but all I can say is that the paradigm of being attacked from both fronts at the same time was true to 73. Maybe now there were different operational and strategic considerations that the Iranians had to make, that Nasrallah and Hezbollah had to make. And they decided to do it in a different way. Maybe to exhaust us, maybe to drag our attention to the south and then go to the north. Maybe because Nasrallah wanted to take over Lebanon, and this means to drag Israel into war. And I truly believe this is a very realistic option, because in the past year, it looks like Hezbollah is trying to drag Israel into war. We wrote about it a lot. We discussed this, I think, in recent webinars that we did, even with camera, because we saw the daily escalation on the northern border. We saw Hezbollah is prepared to war on the northern borders. We saw how it is slowly and surely building more and more military infrastructures and presence of its terrorists on the northern border, taking pictures of me with the groups there. We saw the terrorist attacks on the northern border in the past year with the rockets and infiltration and anti-tank missiles. And all the time people ask, why Hezbollah is doing all of that? Why all these provocations? It was not provocations. The idea was to drag Israel into war. And when Israel failed and disappointed them, maybe there was a shift in the plan and the Iranians decided, okay, so let's start from the south. This is urgent. We must do something. Let's activate our different militia, which is Hamas rather than Hezbollah, maybe sacrifice Hamas rather than Hezbollah. Israel will go full power to Gaza, and then we'll go from the north. This is a very realistic option, and I believe that the Israeli IDF is totally aware of that, and that's why we see the soldiers everywhere up north as well. We see a lot of reports that I cannot confirm of preparedness, movements, enforcements of more militias from Iraq, from Yemen, from Iran itself. I don't know whether these reports are correct, but what I can confirm, I guess you Americans, you saw that as well, that there were already 14 attacks within the past week against American assets in Iraq and Syria, most of them in Iraq, by these militias of the Iranians in these places. Today, I was just dealing with the threat of fabricate militia, meaning the name is not a true militia, but it is clear that there is a threat to attack American sites also in the Arab Gulf. I think that the Iranians don't view this war as a local war, and we shouldn't view this war as a local war. You will ask me, so I will say before you will ask. What about Russia? I know this is coming. I didn't see the questions, but I guess it's already out there. It's a good question. It's even a terrifying question, whether Ukraine was the first course and now we are in the main course and we don't know what the dessert would look like. It is troubling, and we should keep our eyes open, and we should continue to ask this question. What's the Russian stance in here? There was a meeting in Moscow today between Russia and Hamas. I don't know exactly what interpretation to give it, but I'm worried. That's all I can say. We know that Iran provided the drones to Russia to attack in Ukraine, so we understand that the relationship between Russia and Iran are getting stronger. This is not a relationship of love. They don't share any ideology. It's a relationship of interest, and I don't know to which point these interests are going. But what is clear to me is that Iran learned from what happened in Ukraine, and Iran was inspired from what happened in Ukraine. And for Iran, like for President Putin, there is no problem with the loss of life. There is no problem that soldiers, tens of thousands of soldiers, the Russian army lost during this war, and he continued the war. He was not surrendered. He was not going to give up. And all these withdrawals from Russia and ceasefires here and there are tactical, not strategical, to say we're going to stop the war in Ukraine, right? As far as I understand the reality there. And I'm worried of the same scenario here. That we're not going to get to a true ceasefire that, will bring us peace and security. That Iran, that the plan is to exhaust us every day a little bit more, with more arenas, more stuff that more surprises that they have within their militias. With or without Russia, again, I don't know what's the level of collaboration these two will eventually come up with. Sean, am I forgetting anything? Is there something I didn't address? Okay. So let's take it to questions, and if I forgot to talk about something, you're welcome to ask.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarit. Very troubling, very disturbing, especially bringing up Russia and Ukraine there. Well, I think it's clear that that's a war of attrition. And of course, as you noted, Wars of attrition are quite difficult for Israel, given the population, mobilization, and economic stasis that ensues afterwards. Could you talk a little bit about what measures Israel has taken that you're aware of, noting that, of course, that you're not currently serving the IDF and you don't speak for Israel, to protect its northern borders? And how effective have these measures been? And coinciding with that, if you could talk a bit about some of the evacuation measures that have been taken and how those might be taken on the northern front should it open up.
So we definitely see a development of the Israeli response to these attacks on the northern border. And we definitely see that after like almost 3 weeks of fighting, it stabilized in a situation that the IDF success is in tracing these anti-tank squads along the borderline, either before they are launching these anti-tanks or right afterwards. And until now, almost 50 Hezbollah military operatives were killed, which on the one hand, it encouraged Hezbollah to get involved. But again, I don't think this is the true reason. But on the other hand, it is an achievement. It means that the IDF attacks against Hezbollah were to the point to prevent these squads from succeeding to gain their purpose. At the same time, as I've said, the IDF on the northern border is prepared for defense. And every night there are attacks against Hezbollah military presence in South Lebanon. We hear that South Lebanese were also evacuated. The assessments in Lebanon are about 20,000. That's not a lot of people. That's not a lot of people. We cannot build on with collateral damage. We cannot build the towns of South Lebanon are already empty, but it is the beginning of a trend, and I'm very happy for that. Because if things will get out of control, we need these towns empty. We need the Lebanese not to be used as human shields, like what Hezbollah actually wants. So it's good that they are living as well. The investment, as I've said, is with protecting the towns that stayed. As I've said, 9 kilometers from the border. We feel the presence of the soldiers. And at the same time, tactically attacking Hezbollah in the areas next to the border. These are limited attacks. These are tactical attacks. This is not going to eliminate the 10 times more rockets that Hezbollah has than Hamas. It is not going to solve the problem. But it is definitely encouraging to see the accuracy of these attacks and the success to lower the amount of anti-tank missiles that actually hit on the Israeli side. At the beginning, we saw some infiltrations as well. And in the past week, there wasn't any, even if they tried. We don't know of everything. Not everything is published. So even if they tried, they probably didn't succeed. These infiltrations took the lives of 3 soldiers into places. We have seen 2 infiltration of UAVs along the coastline that were intercepted on time. For me, not enough on time because they penetrated into Israel, but they didn't make any damage. And we saw around 200 mortars that were launched. And it's the whole border. I cannot say this area is more active than the other one. I live in the western area, so for me it's very active. It's not only the western.
And as far as those casualties, you mentioned, of course, Hezbollah's claimed 50 fighters dead. It seems to me likely that the number is probably greater than that. Do you agree?
No, we don't know. Look, it's not easy to hide shaheeds because there are big funerals. The families are proud of their shaheeds, of their martyrs. They want to bury them with a big funeral to say, yeah, he's from our family. They want to get the money out of them. They want to get the respect out of them. And that's why I'm not sure they are lying about the amount. And if they are, the numbers are not that different in my point.
In what ways is Israel cooperating with international partners and organizations to address its northern security concerns? And how does this cooperation impact its overall security strategy on other fronts?
Yeah. So you've seen the response, and here it's an opportunity to say thank you. You've seen the quick response of the administration and President Biden sending here the USS carriers and other munitions and jets and F-16s, and all of that is extremely important. First, to encourage us that we are not alone, that we shouldn't feel alone, that there is a superpower behind us, that the administration understands that this is about the free world. It's not just about State of Israel. I hope that America understands that it's not, we cannot talk anymore about deterrence and effects. We should talk about operational deeds against these monsters, meaning that at some point, which I don't know when it's going to be, but at some point, these weapons that were sent to the Middle East will have to be used. Not necessarily against the State of Israel. As I've said, there were already 14 attacks against American assets in Iraq and Syria. So you have to protect yourselves even before protecting me. And that's why it was very important that all these military and strength capabilities of the US Army and Navy and Air Force will arrive here and will be prepared for the radical scenario that I believe that the Iranians are preparing for us. Everybody should understand that it's not about creating deterrence. It's about creating capability to meet the Iranian plans. And I believe that the administration understands that. And I hope America understands it as well.
Under what circumstances do you think Hezbollah might become more greatly involved? Do you think that the terrorist group is wary given what happened in 2006? What are their red lines here, if any?
No, they don't care about 2006. 2006 is dead. The UN Security Council resolution that ended the war is dead, and it died long before October 7th. We talked about it a lot in the past few years. UNIFIL was ineffective in preventing the military deployment of Hezbollah in South Lebanon and the buildup of these invasion capabilities. UNIFIL itself testified that only between February and June, there were 600 crossings of the border from Lebanon to Israel. It's not infiltrations, it's crossings. It's actually testing the fence, testing the security, coming and going, damaging the measures. Only, looking backwards, now I understand that. And so all the arrangement of 2006 doesn't exist. Hezbollah understands the price of war with Lebanon. There will be a price to Lebanon as well. Hezbollah understands it. But Hezbollah also understands that the situation in Lebanon became that bad with regard to the economy and the political crisis that the only way to take this wagon out of the mud, if I'm saying that correctly in English, it means to go to a radical scenario that will change everything completely, and that it will enable Hezbollah to take over Lebanon, to nominate a president that they want to nominate, to get more money that will come into Lebanon, because there are a lot of, now it doesn't go very well. And I want to remind everybody that everybody talked about the gas and the gas rig, and what about, we're still waiting. We didn't receive an official statement of whether there is gas in the Lebanese side or not. Everybody talked about the gas as deterrence, as a restraint for Hezbollah. I don't see this restraint yet. So what can change? What makes Hezbollah invade? Preparedness, strengthening the IDF in ground invasion. I can tell you again, it's not that I know, these are just evaluations, yes? And as a mother, I told my kids, when you hear in the news that there is a ground invasion to Gaza, please, please, please leave home, which they don't want to. Whether it would mean that immediately there will be something big from the north, I don't know. We are talking about pros and cons, yes? But it definitely raises the chances that this will be the scenario. And I think, again, the IDF is totally aware of that. Maybe the plan is not only from Lebanon. Maybe there are plans from, as I've said, other fronts. We don't know what's the plan that was made between Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad and other factions. We don't know what it is exactly, but we understand that we have to be prepared for this escalation because this escalation is part of the plan. And the Iranian leadership is saying that very clearly, that it is part of the plan. They're not going just to back off.
Relatedly to that, of course, the U.S. funds the Lebanese armed forces, the LAF. There's been some pretty strong evidence of LAF collusion, or at least standing down in the face of Hezbollah. Would you care to comment on that, and whether you feel that the LAF is doing what they're supposed to do as a entity that is funded and supported by the United States?
I'll start, I'm a person of details, and I live up north, so I'll start from, stick to the ground for a moment. I had a conversation with one of my staff who lives very close to the border. And yesterday there was an incident on the border where he was there with reporters. And he told me, Sarit, a position that we thought it's a Lebanese army position all these years was attacked by the IDF immediately after Hezbollah launched rockets from this area. So it was not Lebanese army position, it was Hezbollah position. Maybe it was both, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that there is collaboration between the Lebanese army and Hezbollah in South Lebanon. Maybe not only in South Lebanon. I can say that in South Lebanon, I saw it. I saw Lebanese army soldiers accompany Hezbollah taking photos of me on the border last year. I saw it. We saw Hezbollah standing on the towers, watching towers of the Lebanese army, again, allegedly Lebanese army, I don't know anymore. But we saw Hezbollah on top of these towers. I brought reporters that took the photos there. Lebanese army participate actively in hiding the military deployment of Hezbollah in South Lebanon from UNIFIL. It was actively involved in this. The munition that is provided to the Lebanese army will be launched against the state of Israel if there will be war. It will happen. Lebanese army is getting anti-tanks. To which scenario exactly? Who is threatening Lebanon with tanks other than Israel? Why the West is providing anti-tanks to the Lebanese? I understand the need of United States to think big, to think about what will happen afterwards, the necessity to cultivate a military force that will be able to handle Lebanon afterwards. I totally connect to that, but I think that it must be considered what is provided exactly to the Lebanese army, against who it is provided, and what do the West get out of that? Because if eventually everybody understands that Lebanon is captured in the hands of Hezbollah, and we are not doing anything around that, so what do we gain out of supporting them? Now, I also know that if America will not support the Lebanese army, Russia will support the Lebanese army, or Iran, or China, or all of the above. So I understand that the pros and cons here as well. I'm totally aware of that. I'm just saying that we should be aware of the risks and at least demand something from Lebanon. Demand something from the Lebanese army with regard to this assistance that it is getting. And I'm saying that because I learned that just today there is more assistance that's on its way to the Lebanese army. I can't remember from whom, I just saw it.
Related to that, in your personal judgment, will Israel consider potentially striking Beirut and even potentially Tehran should multiple fronts open up? Do you think that's a possibility in your personal estimation?
So, the first few days I said that Tehran is too far away from me. And it's also a greater risk, of course. But I want to say something about the arsenal of Hezbollah, and from that you can understand my answer. In opposed to Hamas, Hezbollah has around 200,000 different kind of munitions. I'm talking about the aerial arsenal, the rockets, the drones, the accurate missiles, barrel bombs, cruise missiles. Most of it, around 200,000, most of it are mortars to a range of 20 kilometers, up to 20 kilometers if there are positions at the border. Maybe not all of them are positioned at the border. 65,000, it's missiles that can get from the border 200 kilometers, that's Jerusalem, maybe less, maybe 40 kilometers, maybe 60, maybe 80. You get my point. A few hundreds of these are accurate, or maybe a few tens. Again, we don't know exactly. That's the PGMs and other cruise missiles in this and other advanced missiles in this. Few thousand are long-range missiles, can cover almost all of Israel, 2,000 UAVs. That's an arsenal that doesn't exist in the hands of Hamas. We see already that the amount of launching of rockets from Gaza it's still to all over Israel, but the amount is a little bit less than it was at the start. It doesn't mean that it will not be more in future days. There are ballasts in it, but they cannot hold 4,000 rockets a day. And these are the assessments of Hezbollah for a few weeks. What do I mean? I mean that there is a plan in Hezbollah to use the accurate missiles capabilities against our civilian and military infrastructures, including the Knesset, including malls and hospitals and gas rigs and refineries and desalination of water. And everything I've just said was said by Nasrallah a few years ago. We presented a map, and he said, I have the missiles that can get to all these places. Where these missiles are hidden, this is the answer to your question. Wherever they are hidden, they need to be attacked.
Gotcha. Thank you. Related to that, do you think that Israel should prioritize one front over the other? Obviously, there's potentially multiple fronts, but say the southern front with Hamas or the northern front with Hezbollah.
I totally understand that Israel is now prioritizing. Israel is prioritizing the south now. Okay, this is clear to me as a resident of the north. There is an offensive in the south and there is a defensive in the north. Okay, and the offensive is in the south. It's because Hamas did what it did, and we understand that we can no longer live next door to Hamas. Israel prioritized. After we are done there, we stabilize the situation there. We can think of how we get the people back to their homes and rebuild the communities that were burned. After we finish burying deads, which we haven't done yet because people were burned alive and not too much remained of them. After we are done with all of that, we will have to address the north as well. And that's why you see kind of prioritizing. I don't want to use the word maintenance because there are attacks against Hezbollah military targets up north as well, but very limited. Maybe because of these limited attacks, Hezbollah will decide again to escalate. As I've said, I don't think it's because of that, it's because of the grand plan. But it will be a very good excuse, no doubt. But IDF is doing whatever it could do now to deal with the simple tactical threats that it sees that are already happening. Okay, if there are rockets, okay, let's attack rockets. If it's UAVs, let's attack who launched the UAVs. If it's anti-tank, let's attack anti-tank squads. You don't see an initiation of attacking the strategic capabilities of Hezbollah yet. And I'm saying that as a resident of the North, I totally understand the need to prioritize the South now, but this is not going to last forever.
Is there, and this is some commentators, Lee Smith, Tony Bedron, some others, have suggested that the U.S. is also restraining Israel, that U.S. presence and carriers aren't just there to deter Hezbollah and Iran, but perhaps to constrain the IDF from going after Iran in the north or else? Or do you think that would you agree with that line of thinking?
I hope that it's wrong, but I don't know. I hope that, again, that nobody expects us to live next door to Hitler. You didn't want that, and you don't even live next door to Hitler. You live miles away. I live 9 kilometers from these Nazis. I hope nobody expects me to put my family at risk and satisfied with a ceasefire that will keep the capabilities of Hezbollah. And once the US carrier is going back home, and once the reservists will be dismissed, and everything will be back to normal, the same can happen again, because what happened proved again after 73, it was also proven that there is no physical barrier that can stop an invasion. The physical barrier and all this technology can stop infiltration. You understand the difference? Invasion with thousands. And they understood that. So what would stop them when there will be only compulsory service soldiers that may go to vacation, and they understand all of that. Some of you from the people that are listening to us now probably went to the border with me and saw how problematic it is, because the people live meters from the fence. And if they will not live meters from the fence will be further to the south. And then other people will live meters from the fence. It doesn't matter.
We've talked a bit, and you've talked a bit about the numerous attacks on American forces, indeed many of which preceded the events of October 7th. I believe there was something along the lines of 80 such attacks as of April, only 4 of which the United States military responded to with force, according to Senate testimony by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Do you have confidence that that might change here? Is there going to be a turning point potentially at which the U.S. will deem itself having to respond? Is that waiting on additional munitions and the THAAD system and so on that Israel or that the United States is now deploying to the region?
If the turning point will not arrive, Iran will have a nuclear weapon, and then it's not about the state of Israel. I think that, again, that's why I keep saying what I'm saying. This is not a war between Israel and Hamas, and it's not even a war between Israel and Iran. It's a war between the West and the radical ideology of Iran. We are just the first in this campaign. In the Iranian regime, Ayatollahs, they believe that Israel is the small devil and the United States is the big devil. If the United States will not use its power to make sure that Iran cannot have these capabilities and cannot use these capabilities, they will be used against you as well. And the Iranians are playing a game in the past, 18 years since the nuclear project was revealed, playing a game of negotiation and meanwhile progressing with their plan and surviving. The whole world should understand that it's not, when I'm asked by reporters, what do I think about the two-state solution? I truly don't understand. There is no connection to the two-state solution. It's not about the two-state solution. Hamas is not interested in the two-state solution. It's about what values do we want to live according to. This is what it's all about.
It seems to me that if there was an intelligence failure, and we've found out more in recent days about October 7th regarding Hamas's actions, that might perhaps change Israel's calculus regarding intelligence of Iran's nuclear capabilities. That perhaps this might change Israel's calculus. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. Again, I'm sorry, maybe I'm different from other experts. I try not to sit in my comfortable sofa here and tell Israeli leadership what to do. It's not my approach. And I'm not even trying to guess what is happening between Gantz and Eisenkot and Gallant and Netanyahu. When I'm looking at the picture, I understand. I truly hope, as an Israeli, that all these threats that we now discussed, including the nuclear threat, my leadership and your leadership understand now that they must be addressed. I truly hope that Europe understands that it must be addressed. I truly hope that educational institutions that are educating children to be loyal to the supreme leader of Iran and exist in the United States and exist in Australia and exist in Europe and elsewhere will be closed tomorrow. Because if they will be not closed tomorrow, within the next 15 years, the children that were educated in your countries will become the future terrorists. I truly hope that you will find a way to educate your children in the campuses that slaughtering babies, raping bodies of women, and burning families alive is not a fight for freedom. It's pure evil. I hope that the students in the campuses will understand that Israel is not targeting civilians, and Israel completely identify with the suffering of the civilians in Gaza. And that's why until today, we didn't eliminate Hamas, and we were willing to sleep with the monster next door, while Hamas should be held responsible. And as long as the public opinion, as well as the leaderships, will not hold Hamas responsible, like the Secretary General of the UN, not only Israelis will continue to suffer, the Gazians will continue to suffer. I truly hope that the queers who are identifying with Hamas will understand that the moment any queer will enter into Gaza, he will be slaughtered just like my sisters and brothers in southern Israel. Maybe even more brutally, if there is something more brutal than what happened. This is what I hope. I don't know what is happening in the Oval Office, and I don't know what is happening in the Knesset or in the government, but this is what I hope that is happening. Because if this is not happening, the whole world is in trouble, not only the state of Israel.
I think that's an excellent point. You know, this is barbarism, and it has to be addressed, and any failure to do so will have consequences that extend far beyond the Middle East. Regarding the northern front, Hezbollah, do they have tunnels to access Israel?
Yes, let's talk about it. I will try to talk about different types of tunnels, even though when we speak about the way they are built, it's practically the same, you know, with regard to engineering. The north is different than the south, meaning that it's rocks. To drill a tunnel in the north takes much more time than in the south. To maintain it is a little bit easier because it's rocks. In the south, you need to concrete the tunnels. You need a lot of cement. In the north, you don't need all of that. Once you drill the tunnels, you put a little bit of strength, and that's it. A few years ago, IDF found 6 border crossing tunnels of Hezbollah into Israel that were fully equipped with air conditioning, electricity, communication, stairs, except for the exits that this tunnel stops around 10 meters below the ground. Everything existed in these tunnels. And we knew that these tunnels were meant for the ground invasion, for the same offensive plan, as I've said, that was executed. Once IDF exposed these tunnels and blocked them, Hezbollah started to plan the ground invasion from above the ground. How do you bomb the wall? How do you bomb the cameras? Other than the border crossing tunnels, we know there are strategic tunnels of Hezbollah, meaning tunnels that connect between the various areas of operation of Hezbollah. Like in Gaza, tunnels that connect between the north and the south of Gaza of tens of kilometers, and now it is clear to everybody that this is what exists below the ground, because we received the testimony of the hostage that was released 2 days ago, and she said, I had to walk kilometers in the underground tunnels. It's the same in Lebanon. There are tens of kilometers of tunnels. Maybe they are in and out in buildings, but it's a net of tens of kilometers that can connect South Lebanon to Beirut area, to the Bekaa Valley, and enable to transfer munitions and I don't want to say soldiers, but military or terrorists from one area to another. These are strategic tunnels. They are tactical tunnels that enable them to run away or to transfer from one area to another. IDF is aware of all of that. And the last type of tunnel is tunnels, or maybe not the last type. Another type is tunnels that are explosive tunnels, meaning that nobody should get in there. They're just, the plan is to just collapse them, and everything that is above will collapse with them. And now there is the question, which I don't know the answer, but my evaluation is that these exist. These are tunnels that get almost to the borderline, maybe meters away, maybe 50 meters away, maybe 100 meters away. It's not that difficult to run 100 meters. Yes, we all know how much it takes. And if there are tunnels like that, that they can pop out meters away from the fence and then cross very quickly and at the same time blind us, as they did in the South, this is truly dangerous. Why do I think there are tunnels like that? First, it may explain, it may provide some explanation, not everything, but some explanation to the failure to identify the invasion in the South. Not all the explanation, I agree. There was a failure in the Israeli side. It may explain why, while when I was standing at the border a few times, I saw Hezbollah operatives just popping out of nowhere, and I didn't notice them before. And all of a sudden, I see 11 of them just walking along the fence. Where did they come from? So maybe they were hiding in I don't know, in the ground between the bushes, and maybe they came out of the tunnel. This is also an option.
That is very ominous. Final question. Some have argued that Israel should preemptively strike Hezbollah's long-range missiles. What are your thoughts on a preemptive strike?
That we should be very well prepared. That preemptive strike starts a war. I don't know what to wish for as an Israeli. I understand the cost of war. Again, 4,000 rockets a day. I don't want to live with these strategic weapons that you just mentioned. So again, I don't want to give advice to my government, but it is clear that these threats should be addressed, and UNIFIL cannot address this threat.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, our time is up. My apologies to those whose questions we couldn't get to. Thank you so much again, Sarit, for your sobering insights. You've given us a great deal of clarity and important information, which will be helpful to Camera's work.